So Iron Thorns, along with Scrafting, Galarian Slowbro, are currently being voted on for a potential ban from the NU tier. Now, I've talked about Galarian Slowbro and Scrafty in previous videos already, so I'm not going to talk about them really at all in this one. However, I did want to put a spotlight on Iron Thorns, because this is a Pokemon that I don't feel like has gotten a lot of discussion outside of maybe the past week, where people really started looking at it as a potentially overbearing threat. So we're going to run through the sets it runs, run through a couple replays too, and I'll give you my opinion on where I currently stand with it. Of course, you've been enjoying the content as of late. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I will be hitting 10k subs later this year. That is not a prediction, that is a spoiler, so if you want to be along for the ride, go down there and leave a like while you're there too. Tell me what your favorite Pokemon currently to use in NU is. If I had to say one, probably Thunderous. There's just something really fulfilling about using a former Uber's Pokemon I made down in NU. And so, let's start off with sets. I'm not going to even talk about the broken set yet. Broken in quotes, because that's your opinion whether or not you think it is. I'm going to talk about Lead Iron Thorns, because it's a set that I've definitely ragged on a ton, because I just don't think it's very compelling. But I want to introduce it to you first, because it is a set that Iron Thorns runs. A little bit, it's a little bit of a spotlight video, plus tournament recap video, plus a meta suspect discussion thread. Not even a suspect, a council, but you get what I'm going for. So, Iron Thorns sometimes runs this lead set on HO. With this setup, you can drop the IVs of your attack to 23, run a Timid Nature, get all the speed you can. You get a speed boost from your boosted energy, and this makes Iron Thorns the fastest possible HO lead. You get both Stealth Rock and Spikes access with Taunt, so you're really good at winning the Hazards matchup. You throw a Dragon Tail on there too, and look at that. Teams can't really set up versus you. It's not a set that I particularly like, in large part just because I feel like it's a waste of an Iron Thorns, but it is an option, and it's one that we've seen to at least some success. Despite me hating it, the fact remains that it's at least a competent HO lead, and I feel like that deserves some sort of recognition in a video like this. But the set that we're potentially going to ban Iron Thorns over is this set, Dragon Dance. Now, we've made multiple videos in the recent past talking about Iron Thorns with Dragon Dance and why it is so threatening. Also why it's maybe not so threatening, but one of the biggest reasons is its bulk and in your ability to Terra versus quite a lot of Pokemon and just proceed to wump them. So Iron Thorns has a really nice distribution of bulk, and so when you Terra into a Fairy type, a lot of these matchups that would normally be pretty bad for you no longer actually suck. Something like Flygon isn't really revenge killing you anymore. You could potentially exploit a Staraptor that's trying to revenge kill you with CC. You just turn into a Fairy type versus it. That applies to Flamigo as well. And the initial typing even's good, because you notice we talked about Staraptor and Flamigo. My initial typing quad resists Brave Bird, so if they lock into that, trying to revenge kill a teammate of mine, I'm able to easily turn the tables with my follow-up sweeper, go Iron Thorns, get my attack boost from boosted energy, Dragon Dance up, and a lot of the time it's pretty hard to stop, because what are the most common stoppers to Iron Thorns? You're going to be thinking about ground types primarily from a defensive standpoint. Something like a Gligar, maybe a Mudsdale, maybe a Palisand. And a lot of these ones don't have a ton that they do back to you. Specifically not without burning their own Terra to try and not get Ice Punched in the face. Like Palisand, it better have like Scorching Sands that get a burn. Mudsdale better be Roar. Gligar better be Toxic, because these don't do enough damage to really trade all too effectively with Iron Thorns to take it to the point that your team is going to easily deal with it. Maybe you'll get an Earthquake off as it Terra Fairies. If you're running Mudsdale, this will probably be your best case scenario. Get like an Earthquake off, and you do enough chip to where maybe your Scarf or like a Poros still is able to Terrastalize and beat it down. Mudsdale, thankfully for the Mudsdale users, is so bulky that Thorns, that's probably like the one ground type that Thorns doesn't love facing. This is something like Palisand doesn't need a ton of chip to be put in Oko range of a booster energy plus one Dragon Danced Iron Thorns, and that makes it not too great. Gligar obviously gets absolutely punched in the mouth by an Ice Punch, not at all a serious check. And you look at other ground types, I mean something like Flygon. Flygon just better hope that it's able to revenge kill with Scarf. That's really about it for Flygon there. Something like Sand Slash. I feel like Sand Slash might live one Ice Punch, but it's not a lot of chip that you need. And then a lot of other physical walls and you just aren't doing a ton back to you. Something like Galarian Slowbro is just getting Earthquaked anyway, so we don't really care about that. You look at, say, Uxie, because I saw it down here. Uxie's not going to be taking the hit very well. It will live one Supercell Slam, but it doesn't really do a lot to you back. Maybe if you've Terra'd, it'll get off a T-Wave, and that's kind of bad. But otherwise, you're not really worried about it. Serena is one of the few mons where I actually don't love the exchange, and even then, Serena doesn't do enough damage to you once you've Terastallized to really make that meaningful progress. Something like Umbreon, I guess, could foul play you, but your opponent's basically throwing away their Umbreon, and I don't even think they one-shot you with foul play. Maybe they do, and I just need to run the calc. You know, Coolfish is just Supercell Slammed. Hitmontop isn't very common, but Terra Fairy is going to mess that thing up good. Diancie, not really a check either. You notice like, a lot of these matchups aren't too wonderful. Avalug's actually one of the better ones, because Iron Thorns doesn't typically run a coverage move that hits Avalug for all too great of damage. And even if it does have a coverage move for Mr. Iron Thorns, I can Terra. And yeah, it better be Iron Defense at that point, or like Curse. Because, yeah, okay, sure, then it can actually beat my Iron Thorns, but Avalug's still not like the most common mod at the moment, so it's not something I'm too worried about. And there are a lot of adaptations to Iron Thorns that you could do that are just generally okay. So we saw Fairy, really nice, especially with resisting fighting, which is going to be the most common revenge kill typing in my view, other than ground, which you've got Terra Bug for. A Terra Bug is going to make it so something like Flygon isn't as good at revenge killing you. It's also going to still give you that resistance to fighting at the cost of maybe something like Dragon Tail being able to phase you out. Now, which Dragon Tail user, you may ask? Yeah, it's not really too many of them, though I have run into Dragon Tail one too many times. So, I mean, it's something. I feel like mostly the appeal to Fairy anyway, so like Umbreon. So we talked about like the foul play point. If you're Fairy, it's not going to matter. You're resisting it, it's not going to do enough damage. If you're Bug, then foul play starts doing a lot more to you. That can get a little bit dire. But Bug gives you some other nice resistances at the expense of that, so not too bad. I guess one of the few things too, one of the offsets, one of the trade-offs to going like Terra Bug, something like Chandelure now can revenge kill you a lot more consistently. And even Flamigo and Staraptor become far more effective revenge killers because going for that Terra, you know, it always leaves you a little bit vulnerable. It means that if you don't get 2 Dragon Dances, then those Scarfers are just going to come in, Brave Bird you, and you're gone. So, still a good option, but there are some noted drawbacks that have me always preferring Fairy over it. But while we're on the topic of Terra Bug, hey, there's another set you could try. This set doesn't really get used at all, and I think it's because people just don't really view it as consistent at all, but you can go like Pin Missile. You're gonna play a little Pin Missile. I don't think you ever drop Ice Punch, though, is the problem. So this is where you run into some problems with Iron Thorns and why it is very telegraphed as a Pokemon, generally speaking. Because when you try to adapt past the booster energy stuff, if you're gonna try to do loaded dice, it's like, okay, so my Rock Blast, Pin Missile, and then like Ice Punch still? Because this, I'm not beating any ground type with. I'm sorry. Maybe Pin Missile with loaded dice does do more than I'm giving it credit for. I'm not sold. It's okay, oh, Steel types also wall you with this, so okay, I run Earthquake. Okay. Now the ground types are still giving me issue. So, it's an option, but typically, we're just going to run Booster Energy. We're going to give it one of those 2 Terra types that we discussed, Supercell, Ice Punch, and then Earthquake. Because this gives you the best overall coverage, and generally speaking, it shores up the vast majority of your bad matchups with Iron Thorns. This mon fits incredibly well on every single Hyper Offense build, too, which I think also is a big reason it draws the ire of people. Because you get to pair it with so many other strong setup sweepers. And even when you run into a bad matchup, like maybe you run into Avalug plus bulky ground type. That's probably the most unideal matchup you can. Avalug, bulky ground type, and then like Scarf Flamigo or something. Just the one that can really threaten revenge killing you from any stage of the game. Even then, when you run this on HO, you've got so much support in the form of other breakers and sweepers that you can expect by the end of the game for Iron Thorns to have some sort of shot at cleaning up. So, makes it a very nice mon to use, very easy to pilot as well. Now, I want to go over some replays. I only have 2 of them. They're both from NUCL. The way I was having some people talk this mon up, I will say, they made it out to be like this mon sweeps literally every game of every tournament it's used in. And in multiple tournaments I saw it used in, there was one game where it tried to beat a Registeel. They both Terra ghosted, and then the Iron Thorns immediately switched out, realizing it was not beating that Registeel. There was actually a Terra Ghost curse incident too, so that was funny. So the first one was between Mince and Lenny, T-Lennet, and this is, I'm gonna admit, not the best played game, but it did show an Iron Thorn sweep and kind of how you need to set up for the mon to do stuff. So, standard HO affair here. We see Mince just throw off the spike, throw off a debond, not using taunt, tells me he probably just didn't have the taunt. And we also see there, something to keep in mind, he ended up being able to delay his turn, so this Frostlass had, I don't know, Trick Room? Presumably? I think that's the only move that it gets that it can, what's it called, have negative priority? No, Avalanche. So it goes for Avalanche, make sure that Kapparaja doesn't end up getting KO'd. Goes out to a Swords Dance Overquill, a mon that's been getting a little bit more usage lately to, hey, guess what? Counteract all of the Galarian Slowbro. See, look at that. Healthy meta adaptation. SD Overquill is a very fun set, one I've been wanting to use lately, too. It gets a little bit of chip off, though, on this Quillfish. This was a mon that not really is checking Iron Thorns, but you can at least try and pivot around Thorns with. And then we see the Gone weaken this Belly Drum Yama, and then immediately switch out into the Quill. This thing ends up sacking itself to a Bullet Punch recoil from the helmet. So very, very funny here. Then comes out the Oricorio. Now this, or was it just a sack here? This is kind of where I feel like T-Lennet misplays a series of plays here. This first turn is just unfortunate. The crit Hurricane sucked, because otherwise this thing Calm Minds up, and this following Terra Steel gets a lot more mileage, because you're just far healthier. The Shadow Ball is going to still do this huge chunk. Maybe they quiver, but you're still getting comfortably 2-shot, and trying to quiver up alongside the Seam Chandelure probably isn't going to go too well. But then unfortunately for T-Lennet, predicting some sort of switch at any point here, kind of gets in his own head, starts U-turning a ton around the Oricorio, and it ends up never working. Eventually this just gets a Roost off. Now, for his sake, thankfully he's a very bulky one, so he's able to take that Revelation Dance. Of course, Mince went for Revelation instead of Hurricane, because you don't want to risk a miss. And you get no chip on the Serena, and it's at full. And these two, as your last 2 versus at full Serena, is pretty bad. But here's where the Thorny list comes in. And we talked about how Iron Thorns is so good on HO, because you just rely on your whole team to weaken the issues at hand for you. Well, what are the issues here? Really, there's not a lot here that's like specifically bad for Iron Thorns if it's given a free setup chance. But probably the worst one here would be Serena. And he's even Terra Bug, so he's got the nice matchup. So you don't care actually about this thing's power up. T-Lennet even expecting there might be something devious there, goes for an Axel. And in a Rapid Spin, so very, very smart. Making sure that he can at least still keep forcing a speed tie, and predicting too that he'd have to go for another Dragon Dance, because otherwise the Raptor keeps it in check. But yeah, from here, because the Serena got so weakened, and because he burned his Terra super early with Chandelure, mostly just in an attempt to not let Oricorio maybe Dragon Dance up and run him down, he ends up getting put down by the late game Iron Thorns. So you probably watch this game, you don't think too much of it. It's like, oh, well, Iron Thorns just cleaned up versus a team that was already pretty weak to Iron Thorns. I mean, you look at this Flygon, I'm assuming was not Scarf. I think it was double Scarf. Not double Scarf. I think this was Scarf, and then maybe I'd have to check calcs. Maybe this was Banded or even like Dragon Dance with U-turn. But let's look at this game. It's actually my own teammate here, Mr. Acid 13, facing off against Baraldno. And you look at his team, you say, okay, well, not the best Iron Thorns matchup, but certainly not unplayable. You've got potentially like one of these two is going to be Scarfed. Plume is pretty bulky. You got Table as well who can Terra. Surely the Iron Thorns will do nothing, so Bombardier's led with, and Flygon is the counter lead here. Now, This is a Scarf Flygon more than likely, but I don't actually remember. But he switches into the Diavolog here on the Bombardier. Rocks are set. Immediate Ice Spirit KO. Guy like me would have Rapid Spun, but, you know, that's just a guy like me. So he switches out. Raj comes in, immediately Psychicked by the, I assume, Sheer Force, because there's no way Tinted Lens does that little. And then we see just basically trading off the Raj's health, and yeah, there's the Life Orb confirming it. Goes for Protect, just to stall a turn. Then no, there's a miss. Then we KO the Braviary in the follow-up turn. Unfortunately, that gives Iron Thorns a free switch in, which is truly diabolical there too, by the way. Seeing this have Protect might have thrown the game in Beralda's favor. Now, again, I don't remember if this was the rocker, like if this is Scarf Rocks or something, and this is Protect 3 attacks. I'd have to check the paste. But it at least gave Beraldo the unearned confidence to go Iron Thorns and say, this doesn't have Earthquake. And just set him a DD. Now, maybe even he's saying, oh, well, you'll be forced out because I could Terra. I'm gonna be honest, bro. I got 2 mons that could be Scarf still, and I got an Avalugg. I don't care. But anyhow, he goes for the DD. Now, here you Terra Electrics on a predicted Earthquake. I guess he lives. And then he gets another DD off, and now he's faster than everything. The Plume dies in 1 hit, because, again, you got 2 DDs. Flygon now is not going to be able to do anything here. Terra steals. Gets absolutely soul red there by the Supercell Slammu. And, yeah, that's tough. Because Lug is no longer able to tank a hit, too, because he's at +2 with a booster energy, so that's ungodly strength. And as we mentioned as well, when this Mon gets 2 DDs, generally you're putting it above every common Scarfer. So, Pokemon like Staraptor, Flygon, Meloetta, etc. Iron Thorns just with a very, very clean game. Terra Electric was certainly kind of surprising here, because I'm not entirely sure what that offers you. Like, I'm going to go here. I'm going to pull up the calc. I'm very curious. Does Iron Thorns going for Terra Electric actually save it versus a Flygon? Because I totally get why he Earthquaked instead of going for... Or, well, he U-turned instead of going for Earthquake, my bad. Because you don't want to give this Flygon set up. Now, I don't think it actually wins the game if it gets set up, mind you. But it's still just easier way to play it. There were options for him to switch to. Predicting one of those options to be brought out makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this would have lived an Earthquake. Wow. Would have taken 5 million, but he would have actually lived one. So there you go. Iron Thorn's able to tank a Flygon Earthquake, and you still do get a lot of the defensive utility from your initial typing, because look at that, you still have a Flying Resist. And I feel like we've done some videos where Iron Thorns got revenge killed because it Terra'd, and then I was able to kill it with a Staraptor. Or maybe I don't remember. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So, that's the Iron Thorn showcase right there. Now, what am I going to be voting? This is where there's a little bit of talk about how do I think through votes sometimes when I'm torn. Because there's a mentality that a lot of people have in tiering where if a Mon is kind of on the border, or not even a mentality people have, but there's like a question. How do you decide when you're on the border about a Mon vote if you think it's like borderline broken? Because in a lot of NP threads, you'll see people talk about it where like, I'm not really sure how I'll vote. You always see those suspect threads end with people saying, I don't know how to vote. I still have to think about it, but I lean, you know, do not ban or ban right now. And it's because sometimes I'm on like Iron Thorns. I don't think it's like super evident if it's broken or not. I think we have a lot of evidence of it being able to take over games when given the ideal situation. But we don't live in an ideal world. Iron Thorns isn't always given that. And I don't think there's really anything wrong with the Pokemon that is meant to sweep games being able to sweep games when it's given the best chance to set up and do so, you know? In this game, for example, Avalugg got weakened very early on. It took that trade versus Bombardier, wasn't able to like get back to sturdy health or anything, or just general high health. We had the Flygon lose the 50-50. Things like that. We also had the Raj switch out and not threaten any sort of damage. Like, if Raj did not switch on that turn and just went for an Iron Head versus Iron Thorns, or an Earthquake if it had it, yeah, I mean, win that exchange. It's just, we talked about the protect thing. I don't know if he had or not. I'd have to check the team and confirm. But the way I see it is this. When you're looking at a mon that's very, very borderline, ask yourself whether or not it actually adds positivity to the tier. With regards to, does it contribute to a healthier meta to have it around or not? Maybe you argue something like Blastoise from last gen is like, well, you look at that mon, it was maybe borderline, but still had a lot of pushback against a ban. That's different. I think Blastoise wasn't even broken. Leave me alone. Mon was bad, and people wanted it banned. But Iron Thorn's a little bit different in my view, because I do actually think pretty highly of it after using it more and more lately. Recency bias, sure, but I've seen it in effect a little bit more. In some games, it does feel like way too easy to win with, because you'll just like Terra randomly versus something, and it just gives you so much momentum. But the way I look at it is this. Compare Glowbro and Scrafty to it, I do think those at least have some modicum of positivity that they add to the tier. And I haven't felt that they're overly unstoppable or that they win the games too easily. With Iron Thorns, I don't really feel like it adds that kind of level of some use to the tier. It mostly is just serving as some tool for HO to continue running down opponents with. And while I think having HO as a healthy archetype in a format's always good, I don't believe that it needs Iron Thorns to be good. It's not like banning Iron Thorns kills off Hyper Offense entirely as an archetype. And so, right now, I'm believing that I lean probably banning on Iron Thorns. And I'll definitely still think more on Glowbro and Scrafty stuff, because those mons are very polarizing, and I don't want to just decide, oh, well, I haven't felt their OP, so I'm just going to vote do not ban. I think that'd be very negligent of me, especially as a tier leader. I owe it to everyone to at least think through my votes for more than 5 minutes. But with Iron Thorns, my perspective of it is this. I don't think it adds anything to the tier, outside of being a Dragon Dance sweeper. And although I'm not positively sold that it is this broken Pokemon that obviously needs a ban, I do think there's enough question marks around it to where I feel comfortable banning it. And then looking at it down the line, if we end up deciding to and saying, okay, let's re-look at this mon, especially with the added context that there will be at least two more massive tier shifts hitting in you within the next month and a half. So let me know your thoughts down below on Iron Thorns, and too, like I said earlier, what's your favorite current indie mon to use? I always like hearing what people are using. I hope y'all enjoyed this. Is that all I have to say? Oh, I have one other thing to say. If you're gonna post some really just inflammatory shit in the comments and then delete it, come on, bro. At least stand by your flame. Don't be a pussy. You know who you are if you watch this far. I still see that shit in my notifications, boy. You're not slick. Love all you though. I'll catch you next time. Peace.